A couple of weeks ago, Chris Roberts made a long reply to a post on Spectrum, and it got the people going. It was some talk about a not very talked about subject, the room system and atmosphere in general in Star Citizen. But there's a lot more information about this topic than what was discussed in the post. Let's talk about that. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. The room system is not exactly a system for rooms, despite the name. It is rather a system for volumes of space that may be filled by gases or atmospheres. It also describes their pressure, density, and temperature. So a planet has a room with its atmosphere, a ship has rooms being their various compartments, and even the coil in Squadron 42 has its volume described by a room, which would be a really big room. This system has actually been functioning in game for some time. Back in 2017, the Foundry 42 team showed off some work they had done to allow gases to travel through doorways to transfer between spaces, using the Door 2.0 system included in the Item 2.0 conversion. Because of this development, when you suffocate for lack of oxygen, that is because you are in a room with not enough oxygen. Which makes sense. Each of these rooms can have two different states they are in, mutable and immutable. Essentially, this is the difference between active and inactive in terms of the atmospheric pressure system. So if a room is mutable and you open it to a vacuum, everything will quickly be pulled into the new space to fill it. Whereas with an immutable volume, the room is self-contained and no opening will cause a pressure change in that room. These immutable volumes make sense when you think of them as areas such as planet atmospheres or the vacuum of space itself. They contain an infinite amount of whatever it is that fills their volume. So the Hurstons can ruin as much of their atmosphere as they want and never really have to worry about too big of a problem. Now, while this sudden loss of pressure actually did happen at a time a couple years back, that's not how things are currently working in the game from our perspective. But we know why that is. Chris has explained that while these things are being set in place, as with many things in an ongoing developed game, there are other systems that do not allow them to function properly. In this case, it's the life support system and the accompanying ventilation systems. When life support is properly introduced to the game, its goal will be to run off the fuel of your ship and keep the ship, or whatever volume it functions in, at a life-supporting level in terms of temperature and atmosphere. Because this system is not in-game yet, oxygen cannot be supplied to the spaces, so ship rooms are set to immutable by the devs to avoid permanent atmosphere loss, thus, no explosive decompression, and no venting compartments to kill someone silently. Essentially, no danger of being in a hangar bay that opens up into space while you're in it. And while we can see that life support isn't in-game, and most ships don't have functioning ventilation systems, CIG does have an initial implementation working internally. But rolling it out for the ships will take a while, as every ship, as tiring as it gets, will need some level of refinement to implement the required and necessary components and their vents. This has happened for many systems in the past and will continue to happen for systems in the future. This is just part of the process of creating a game with defined expectations, but not necessarily the defined methodology. Luckily, as development has progressed and CIG has learned from their mistakes and processes, they've decided to approach this issue with a more holistic approach. See, while some systems have been slowly implemented to ships, like the atmospheric flight model, the annunciator panels, and the targeting system, there are a few other systemic ship features like more interactive cockpits, the dynamic fire system, and an update to the pipe system that shares resources like power, heat, fuel, and atmosphere between components. So it all comes down to when they will be able to make passes on all of the old and new ships to update them for these new systems. This is why, while some improvements may be mentioned on monthly reports and certain things may disappear from the roadmap, they are not gone, but rather waiting on underlying systems to catch up. Now, how, Space Tomato, will this room work once it's implemented, you might be wondering. What are the fine details of this actual process? Lucky for you, I do my research. So each room has a volume, and each volume has X amount of gas. All this gas has mass. It's gas mass. Each of these volumes also contain objects designated as producers and consumers. As you can imagine, producers are your life support systems, while consumers are usually people, but can be other things like fires. But this wouldn't be a proper math equation without some complicated variables. While you need to keep in mind how many consumers there are versus producers and the statistics of those producers like refill speed, efficiency, or quality grade, you also need to consider the size of the room, whether characters are wearing their own power suits, when the room was sealed, or if there's even an open door. There will be a lot of things to take into account, rightly so, as this is meant to be a proper spaceship simulation, and space ain't safe. There are plenty of scenarios that you can imagine that this system would factor into, like sealing off a room full of attackers and venting it into space, starving a raging fire of fuel so that a component in the afflicted area can be replaced, or targeting a specific segment of a ship to blow valuable cargo out into space to be collected. Just know, Star Citizen's gameplay in large part is meant to be systemic in order to open up possibilities of emergent and immersive gameplay, and allow many players to encounter completely different results from similar encounters. The downside to this kind of approach is that you don't really see results very quickly. As opposed to just scripting these events and having them play out, you have to build the fundamental systems and make them interact with each other fully before the apparent gameplay can come out and we experience it ourselves. While I believe there have most definitely been some hiccups in the game development and progress of Star Citizen as a whole in the past several years, the ambition and obvious goal of the game is what pulled me in and kept me on board. And this system is one of many that I expect to meet this level of complexity so that I can enjoy the game to its fullest. And thus, I'm patient for the most part, though I will always have constructive criticism to level at the devs. I'd like to thank you for checking this video out and invite you to subscribe for more information, updates, deep dives, and cinematics regarding Star Citizen and other sci-fi gaming in general. I'd also appreciate it if you could help support my endeavors as I make this my full-time career through both Patreon and YouTube channel memberships. If you'd like to chat with me directly outside of the comments, feel free to hop on my Twitch streams Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or join my Discord gaming community where you can talk and even play with me as well. And once more, I'd like to thank you for sticking around. Welcome to the garden.